Welcome to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with two very good and nice, amazing people who have researched the JFK assassination and who I'm learning a lot from, mostly because when you look into the assassination of John F. Kennedy, or is it John or Jack? They keep saying his name differently in multiple different scenarios. Does anybody else notice that, or is that just me?
No, that's everyone does it.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to find the right information. I'm trying to learn as much as I possibly can. You think you're down one road, and next thing you know, boom, it turns out that whole route was fake. And this is kind of what I started off the conversation with is where can we find the right information? What do you go off of? I'm trying to go off the documents. I'm trying to go off obviously what evidence people have as well too. But the issue when it starts to look into this thing, and a part of a reason why I think it's also not solved, is that the number of people who might get a ABC or might get an Oscar off of something they do that I guess confers the original statement that was from the Warren Commission, but also the number of films that come out and the number of books that are written that tend to have a more fantasy aspect to it that kind of derives it from the main point. And you start getting into crazy territory where it's like, what evidence, where's the evidence to this? And it sounds like movie scenario type stuff. And I think that there's things that you can question. There's a lot of flags that should be raised on all of it, which should cause a second investigation back into it. And I'm hoping that you guys could enlighten me a little bit on where's a good place to start for anyone out there that's new, trying to figure out what the hell to do. Not just sites like your own, like Prayer Man or the reopened Kennedy case, but also good documentation to go by, protocols you guys went by, names that you trust, because I'm hearing names like Mae Brussel and the Mary Farrell Foundation. They're all CIA agents. Don't believe it. They're spies incorporated in the groups, where I'm just like pulling my fucking hair out, trying to figure out what is right, where do I go? And I want to make sure I'm not wasting a bunch of time investigating something that could just be, dust in the wind.
Mary Farrell is good. It's
Okay.
great. It's the biggest document storage of all of them. They have more than the archives, more than any other archive. The ARC helps them with them. That's the Assassination Archive Research Center. That's Jim Lazar and Alan Dale and a handful of others. That's very good. But for myself, well, my introduction to documents was, of course, by reading books, and people refer to them, but you can never find them. And then after that, in 2014, I started late 2014, early 2015. I became a friend of the Howard Weisberg archive. That's where I just basically spent a whole year at by going through it and learning about the untold facets of the case that aren't that well known even to people that write books or documentaries as such. And that introduced me to a much bigger world. And after which I basically decided right there and then, like, I'm only focusing on Oswald's last 46 hours and that's it. I don't want to deal with anything else because it's way too big, and it is way too big. And from there on, I progressed and basically started finding, but it's forums where documents started to get introduced, and Greg's forum and ROKC and the Education Forum. About a dozen to 20 individuals at those particular times were actually actively pushing newspaper articles or documents, RIF numbers, and so forth. So slowly that progressed into, oh, hold on, what does this document say? What else is in there? And, is there any other valuable info as such in there? And that's in a lot of cases, that is the case. That you end up finding things just because they overlooked it or their angle is slightly different. And then, it just builds up. And, some people quit real quick, and some people just go on about it. I'm still in it when it comes to documentation. I've still got bags full of documents that I need to scan in, and I'm probably busy until the end of next year with it. And that's because I basically took on the task of digitizing Malcom Blunt's archive, which I'm telling you now, just imagine a bulldozer picking up all these bags and folders with documents in it and basically tossing them on the ground from 20 feet up, and then basically put them back into folders. And that was my mission, basically, just go through it and basically put some sort of system together. Because the thing is also, he had documents from other archives, because he's been going through various archives over in the United States. And on top of that, those documents don't have RIF numbers. RIF numbers are only for the documents that are at the National Archives in Washington. And on top of that, also, when Malcolm was just bored one afternoon and say, my God, I've got 80 pages of drivel here, but there's 6 pages of actually valuable stuff, he basically just said, like, sod the rest. I'm scanning these 6 documents in, and that's that. Of course, all that has consequences. And but that's then for other people to deal with and basically find that particular document. Overall, the stuff is pretty complete. But you know, you learn. The reason why I basically went through documents was because, and Malcolm said it even better than I did. He said, when you read a book, you always read other people's opinion and about what they found and how they did it, this, that, and the other. Is that the way? Not to me. And therefore, I basically started digging into documents, and I'm going to paint my own picture. I'm going to put the puzzle together the way I think is fit, within that massive framework, because we're talking about a huge whopper of a puzzle, but I'm only taking a small section of that and say, that bit I'm going to try and figure out. And that's what it comes down to me. I mean, I don't care about conspiracy or lone nutterism. To me, it's a puzzle, and I'm trying to basically put documentation in place. Hence, I also synchronize it.
The CTLN thing, I mean, it's just 2 sides of the one coin. I mean, they need each other to it's like good and evil. It's that duopoly type thing that keeps wheels turning and people spinning. It's not good for the case. It's not good for history. But it's whether it's a hobby for them or what the story is, I don't know. Or they just like being trolls, but they have an interest in it from their own psychology, I think, more than anything else, to keep this thing going ad infinitum. They don't want it solved. They don't want it solved.
Well, that's like the one thing I thought, like, holy shit, like I'm getting interested in it now. People have been interested in it for 50 years. That means there's going to be plenty of documentation. So I'm not going to be starting off at the scratch surface. And then I come across something saying, like, which I don't know is true. You can probably verify it for me, Bart. The TSBD, where's the power out at the time? Like, somebody put that up in the forum, and I was like, was there a power outage or something like that too?
Well, Geneva Hine made mention of that, because she saw the buttons go out on the phones. And somebody said, I don't know who it was, about the elevators as well, but I'm not really sure about that. Geneva Hine was a killer witness, though, I have to say. She was very good at what she did. She discredited.
But the lights went out on the thing because people stopped ringing because the assassination was happening. They all had their radios switched on.
That too. I mean, there's all kinds of, you know what? There's not one person that basically said it with that certainty and go, well, yeah, they were out because I couldn't go and this, that, and the other, and blah, 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 because everybody was fixated on watching.
The thing about the elevators, well, as you know, you had to do certain things to be able to operate them.
Yeah, one of them.
Like, only one of them, was it?
Yeah, one of them was with a handle that you had to hold and move and so forth. The other one was a button system.
You had to release it or something like that. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but it wouldn't move unless something was done to it first.
Yeah.
And it could have been stuck up on one of the upper floors because of that reason. You know, it wasn't necessarily that the elevators stopped working. It's just it was a normal part of the operation of the elevator.
Geneva Hine killed off the second floor lunchroom encounter as well, because she was the only one in the office from 12:25 to 12:35, according to an FBI report from the 24th. She was the only one. Yet Mrs. Robert Reed pretended to be into that room as well at the same time and saw Oswald come past having a Coke in his hands.
Yeah, no, she wasn't. Look, Hines volunteered to stay up there and answer the phones to allow all her colleagues to go and watch the parade. Okay, so that's what happened. Now, I've read all the reports of all that group that went down. It included Mrs. Robert Reed. The reports also mention, at least 3 of them mention, that they all went back up together as a group as well at about, well, I don't know how long after, but at a certain point after the assassination, they all went up together as well.
Minutes.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. But some of them specifically named Geraldine Reed as being one of those who was with the group that went back up.
Yeah.
And I mean, as you know, Geneva Hines or any of that other group, none of them mentioned seeing Oswald at that time. Geraldine was Roy Truelly's secretary, so I mean, I think there was a bit of loyalty happening there to his bullshit story.
Oh yeah, big time. It shows really well during her Warren Commission testimony. Could be so, well, maybe. She's just basically saving herself because Mrs. Reed was sitting right opposite her. Now, imagine this scenario. You're working together, this, that, and the other, 4 months after the assassination. Then all of a sudden, both of you have to go to Washington and testify in front of the commission. And then basically contradict each other by saying, no, I was there on my own for 10 minutes. Nobody showed up for at least another 20 minutes after the assassination. Whereas the other one, her supervisor basically says, hey, I was there. I saw Oswald walk through with a Coke in his hand. How's that going to work out? Oh, the next day back at work, also hunky-dory, so cool in the gang? No, it's not.
When Reed and Truelly went to Washington to testify, they were actually rewarded. Truelly and Reed's husband, Robert, were both given a grand tour of the FBI headquarters as a guest of Hoover, as a reward for what they testified to. You know.
Well, this is one of the craziest things is that when we talk about like what I think a lot of people would probably think that you would go off a witness that was there. They probably know what happened best. Now, I've talked to people on my show about memory studies, and it's very, very hard to remember things exactly the way that it happened. Sometimes you add details that necessarily weren't there. And I know that's how people dismiss a lot of these witness statements. Like, oh, that person's uncredible, or that person's uncredible. But one thing that is documented, and it brings into the bus incident that I thought was real until Bart, you told me it wasn't, is that they talked about the bus driver was kind of coerced in a sense of saying that it was Oswald. He mentioned seeing like a teenager on his bus, but couldn't make a clear statement that it was Oswald, that it was even the same guy. But then
what he did actually say quite clearly in his testimony was that he thought that he was there to ID that teenager. He didn't think he was there to ID Oswald. He thought he was there to ID the teenager. That's in his testimony.
So there's a lot.
And what he did was pick Oswald as the one who looked closest to that teenager, because the other 3 in the lineup were all older and taller. They were all employees of the police department.
Well, from what I read in the documents that they had, they said that 2 of the people in the lineup were younger age, like 19, and I think
that was a separate lineup though.
Yeah,
the first. What's that?
That was later. Yeah, it was in the later.
Yeah, it was later. Yeah. That first lineup was they used 3 older police employees.
Yeah, they used 2 policemen and a jailer in the first one.
Yeah.
And they gave him like a sports jacket and this, that, and the other. And, you know, I mean, you look at the lineups, then all you have to do is go, first of all, he's the guy with the beaten up face, with the shirt with the hole in underneath his arm, his elbow. And the other ones wore clean clothes. you know, and they were given one of them was given a sports jacket and so forth. And on the 23rd, it was much. And on top of that, when they basically come in and state their name in front of the witness on the other side of the window mirror, they also have to give their place of work. So Texas School Book Depository. Oh, why? That's the place where Kennedy got shot from. Right. Okay. Hold on a minute. It's a bit of a dead giveaway. The whole thing. The lineups were done in a very refined way, but basically in a very refined way to make it look like Oswald was the guilty guy. And then if you listen to the statements of the cab drivers, for instance, so wrong. It's all so wrong, and it's all done before and after, and it's all fishy. I can't say a lot of good things about the Dallas police from at that time, what they did in that particular case. Greg's dug deep into that regarding miscarriages of justice. I read the Wade book about Henry Wade. And that book basically stated that, if I'm correct, it was the miscarriages of justice was tenfold the amount of the United States average, basically. So Texas was 10 times.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was 10 times the amount. What lone nutters refuse to discuss, or cannot discuss, or just can't comprehend to discuss, is basically what law enforcement was like in the South. I'm not talking just Dallas, but, you know, right next to it, the whole South, how that was, and how easy it was to convict someone and make him look guilty, and how easy it was to railroad someone to the electric chair and so forth. They don't want to know about that. And I think it's a massive thing, because what they have been doing all those years as trained, seasoned police officers, detectives, captains, that's what they're doing on the Kennedy case. The only thing they couldn't do was beat him up. That's the only thing they couldn't do, because there were feds and Secret Service was there, and every other law enforcement agency was there. Because had this been a case of no press in the corridor and no Secret Service and just all kept outside, this, that, and the other, Oswald would have felt a few knuckles or two.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. But I mean, that's where our approach differs to a lot of other people. We can see that the methods they used to frame Oswald were no different. There was nothing special about the way they framed him. It was the same MO that they'd used for God knows how many decades, as well as every other jurisdiction in the US and around the world, I might add.
In our last conversation, I told you, Rob, that if Fritz and all the others didn't take notes during the interrogation as such, what they would do is have another officer or two sit in with them. Now, they wouldn't take any statements. They would just write some words down, this, that, and the other. Based on that, they created a report. The suspect would never, ever get to see this report, would be kept in the dark. And then when it comes to court time, they wouldn't have produced that report. They would just sit on the stand and they would basically say, well, such and such happened, this, that, and the other. And then Elmer Boyd or Richard Sims, which are two detectives that worked closely with Fritz, would just sit in on the stand afterwards and would just go, yeah, that's what he said. Yeah, that's confirmed. Yeah, that's not. And it would take another 20 years, early 80s, until the police would actually start audio taping interrogation.
That's why they were eventually forced to do it. I don't know what the practice is called in the US or Britain, but here, that what you just described there actually had a name. It was called verbaling, where police would just verbally put words in the mouths of the suspect to incriminate them, whether that was, like I say, a verbal statement, or whether they'd actually write, he said blah blah blah, and it wasn't true, but they put that in the statement anyway. Either way, it was called verbaling, and that's what, again, that's what we see here. There's stuff in the reports in those interrogation reports, which are absolutely not true. Absolutely not true.
Well, they have a document in the 2021 release that talk about when interviewing a witness or someone that would deemed an action that would be unlawful, that when they're speaking about the CIA or the intelligence agency, you cannot have one of your officers of the CIA be in that interrogation because it might skew the witness's testimony, which I was like, well, that's common sense. Obviously, you don't want to talk shit on the CIA if there's a CIA agent in the room. So saying that and putting it in a document, but then they put under it, they say, unless deemed necessary. And I'm like, well, then what the that's like lawyers speak. You can just see this is necessary. We need to do this, and then have the person sitting in the room.
There's a loophole, Robbie. They always put a loophole in there.
Which, I mean, I at the time when I first got introduced to this, I guess my main conclusion was that it was some type of central intelligence agency or whatever you want to say that was involved in this whole thing. And I don't rule that out. But as I start to learn more about Dallas politics and Dallas police at the time, I start learning that there's a lot of weight that you can put behind an aspect of, if you now have someone in your custody who's apparently the alleged killer of the President Kennedy, and you look at what was going on in Dallas at that time, probably a lot of things that are very, very corrupt. You know, I think openly, most of the members on the Dallas police force were KKK members. Now, that might be more common back then.
It was in the 20s where they had, I think, 12 or 15% that was member of a secret society, which was the KKK. And it became less. But Dallas has been very right-wing ever since, because also what you need to understand is that the Jim Crow laws were about to be abolished or had just been abolished as such. But having those laws abolished is one thing. Changing the average human person's thinking as such, not being such a racist and right-wing, is a whole different, other different matter. And even though it had happened 60 years ago, there are still remnants of that stuff actually about. These are, again, that's another factor that a lot of people just don't want to incorporate, especially when you talk about the racism thing. How did the black people that were inside the Texas School Book Depository feel? Well, there was a couple, Troy West, for instance, was scared, didn't want to have anything to do with it. It almost like says, white man's problem, don't bother to get involved. But that's pretty much what it is. And same goes for Eddie Piper. Eddie Piper had to be dragged in for the second time to confirm that Roy Truly had actually come in with a policeman, but he still wouldn't do it. It still was muffled. And then if you look at the three black guys that were on the 5th floor, their stories also are completely all over the place from the word get-go, from their Dallas police statements, their FBI statements, the Secret Service statements 2 weeks later, the Warren Commission, and so forth. And these people were all on the, Eddie Piper had a DUI from at least 10 years before. Now, these days you go DUI 10 years ago, whatever. But to me, back then, that was like being branded with a sign of something.
Well, I tell you that the fine that he got for that was rather hefty for now, let alone for the time. It was a massive fine he copped. And it was there was a whole list of people on that document who were fined. From memory, his was by far the largest amount. Now, whether that was because of his skin color or because he was super drunk or whatever, I don't know. But for whatever reason, he copped a much larger fine than everyone else did.
I remember it was in a newspaper article.
Well, since you guys raised those flags to me in those conversations, and you've enlightened me more about the Dallas police at the time as well, too, and then obviously witnesses that were involved. I mean, there's statements in the official reports that came out in 2021 that say there's no evidence that there were officers that were at Jack Ruby's club. But then there's witnesses that say that they saw officers sitting at Jack Ruby's club.
It's more a question of who didn't know Jack Ruby.
Yeah,
so
exactly,
it's like, what the hell? Like, I'm over here, like, literally trying, like, I'm seeing one thing say one thing, and then there's evidence that points another way, where I start going, I think the idea, like, my whole perspective has changed, that the Dallas police literally had a person that was going to attract media, that was going to attract other agencies to investigate this, because obviously it's the death of a president. And their best thing is to make sure that they got this person out of their hands as fast as possible. Whether you want to say that they hired Jack Ruby to do the initial killing, but they didn't do very good in a plan to protect him from any of those possible scenarios happening. I think having only 4 people around you and then the one person that's in front of you goes to open up the door, you can say that could be a slip of the mind. But I've seen people for less charges be protected heavily in certain scenarios. So you get into this aspect of like, I don't think they really cared to protect him. I don't think they wanted anything recorded. I think they wanted this problem out of their hands as fast as possible.
They brought him in as a cop killer, so that's for starters. Yeah, that was the first thing that already doomed him right there and then. He wasn't just brought in as a suspect. He was brought in as a cop killer. And now this whole thing about this Jack Ruby thing, let's go to Prayer Man and use some of that. The people that pretend not to know Oswald are legion. They're everywhere. Oh no, I never spoke to him. I never talked to him, this, that, and the other. I didn't know him. Now, to an extent, that's true, because a lot of people were taking the front elevator, and only the ones that went downstairs to the first floor and deal with shipments or so forth, or basically collecting books, must have had an interaction or two with him. But overall, everybody is really busy distancing themselves from Lee Oswald. And why is that? Because he got dropped off at Dallas police as a cop killer right there and then. Think about the people that were sitting there at that time. Billy Lovelady was sitting there. You had Bonnie Ray Williams. You had Danny Arca Garcia, and you had Bill Shelley over there. And they see this happening all of a sudden, that somebody who's a co-worker is basically brought in as a cop killer. What? You're going to be saying, oh, I stood next to him on the steps, this, that, and the other, because let's just also add on Buell Frazier and Joe Molina.
Well, look what happened to Buell by bringing him into work. He was arrested. So
yeah. So it got them in the shit, basically. And why would a black person that probably see him say as such, or a woman even, because I don't think women were treated as equal as they are compared to these days. I'm not saying they are treated equal, but that was a lot less 60 years ago as such, you know? So these are all elements, again, completely disregarded. Let's not bring that up, the social, economic, or situation, or whatever is happening at that time, and so forth. No. It's quite clear from the word get-go. Oswald killed this cop, and he, he's a demon, and he's a commie agitator, and because that's another thing. Within 40 to 45 minutes of his arrest, he's already marked as a commie agitator, a defector, by a hostie in the basement with Ganaway. So, and there's about the fastest report ever created by Jack Revel for Ganaway, basically stating as such. What people don't know is that Revel and Hostie had a bit of a ruckus the night before, so they had a massive argument the day before. So, of course, if Revel could shaft Hostie officially in a report.
There was also a lot of misreporting coming out of the interrogations as well, because they were telling the press that he admitted being a communist, when in fact all he admitted to was being a Marxist, not a communist. And obviously that's too fine a distinction for those coppers. They just couldn't tell the difference.
That's what they bring up when I was looking through the archives. They bring up that there was an interview with Castro that wasn't planned, where he said some incriminating stuff, or he said something about the United States government, and it got published in a newspaper. That newspaper, they linked that to Oswald. It was a Russian newspaper that was always delivered to Oswald, whether it was for Marino or if it was for Oswald, it was delivered to his address. And they said that that's the reason why he wanted to go to Cuba in the first place, because apparently they have recordings of people saying that he wanted to go over to Cuba. Do you know anybody? I need to speak to Castro. Is quotes that people kept saying he said. I don't know, because I haven't seen anything else from those people besides just those quotes that they keep saying that they said. I haven't seen them addressed anywhere else in any of these documents. So it makes me think that did they just pull this out of thin air?
When you were removed from the military to transition into intelligence work, that's called sheep dipping. A lot of people mistake what happened in New Orleans with Oswald, where he was handing out those leaflets, pro Castro leaflets and all that sort of stuff.
Fair play for Cuba Committee.
Yeah, they call that sheep dipping, but it's not. That was made possible by the sheep dipping. The sheep dipping was the transition from the military to intelligence work, and that entailed a fake into early out from there. And one of the things Oswald did when he got to the USSR was write to his brother Robert, saying that he would kill any Americans who went into war against Russia. Okay, and if you go back a few months, it was well publicised that, or not, I don't know how well it was publicised, but a guy called William Morgan had gone over to Cuba to fight in the revolution. Okay, and he had written a similar letter back home saying, "I will kill any American who fights against Cuba." Now, those are the sorts of things you write when you're building that legend and transitioning and justifying why you've left the army or Marines or whatever. Okay, so that's what's happening there. Oswald wrote verbatim almost what William Morgan had written, and it became after Morgan was killed, it did come out that he was a CIA agent. So, and he was implanted inside Castro's revolution.
You see where it gets confusing for anyone that's trying to figure this thing out?
Yeah.
I get lost.
Now. Walk away now. Just
no,
walk
I'm
away.
in. I'm hooked. I'm in. Mostly because you have to look at, especially if you take into account for, like, I know people always bring this up and some people research it, but it's the number of witnesses, for instance, that saw something completely different in all this. I mean, there's witness deaths as well, too, whether you want to call them suspicious or not. I mean, there was just weird scenarios people were being put in and having alleged last phone calls of trying to blow secret information. Now, I initially thought that you would have been killed by like some government thing, but imagine if it's Dallas police just not wanting more attention brought onto a scenario that they're trying to wrap up. I mean, that makes way more sense to me than the Central Intelligence Agency tracking people.
I think Aguila Clemens is a perfect example. The Tippett murder witnesses were told a thing or two. Aguila Clemens is a great example, who had visitors from the police telling her to shut up. Helen Markham, same thing as well. Her son was somebody who'd just been on parole. There are elements of that have been reported as such. Again, if you're going through all the statements, well, how many can you say for certainty that they were killed or shot at as such? And, I've never seen any real deep research into the people that have started talking this, that, and the other. I mean, if it was such a concerted conspiracy effort to get all these people to shut up, this, that, and the other, how come Bill and Gail Newman are still around? They can tell their story every year, and they can just say, right, the bullet hit from that, came over here, hit him in the head, on the side, this, that, and the other.
That list was compiled by Penn Jones. Penn Jones was a well-meaning person, but he was way over the top with lots of things he thought and said. And I think that list was one of the problems.
I agree with that, but I also bring up the aspect of the same reason Alex Jones is still around. I mean, if you look at the media, for instance, I listened to the recordings the day Kennedy was killed, all the recordings that they have like on YouTube. Someone has like a 7-hour like long videos of MSM or whatever you want to say, whatever news network was going on at the time. There's two different ones that I checked. One had like commercials. It was interrupted in a soap thing, but they gave you updates. And as they were updating, they said, apparently Kennedy's, he's still alive. He's in critical condition. I don't think so. Like, if you watch the Zapruder film, if you want to agree if that's real or not, but I'm pretty sure Kennedy died in the car. But there was speculation, and all that speculation becomes dangerous because I think at the time there was a lot of people still waiting. And then they later said a priest doesn't necessarily mean that he's dying, but it's just something, a part of the Catholic religion that they do if someone's in critical condition.
I think that's why they kept announcing he was still alive when he really wasn't. It was because they had to get that priest in. There was a problem getting one. So the death announcement was delayed until he could be given the last rites by this priest.
So I mean, even the media had a job there to, report the actual things and not speculate a whole bunch, but everybody was trying to capture on the story. You can't really knock them for doing that as well either. I mean, in their eyes, it's not only an aspect of not going to war with Russia by saying it's a lone gunman, it's also an aspect of, we got to make sure people don't freak out. We got to give them hope that their president's still alive. And
well, but the other thing is there was just a lot of trust in government and law enforcement. I mean, in hindsight, we know that the Dallas police at that time were nothing short of thugs, dangerous, murderous thugs. But at the time, they were heroes. They were local heroes.
I bet you, especially when it comes to like Dallas police, though, I bet you people, I was always wondering what the Dallas politics were back then, because I bet you the people that were there at the actual thing rather than the people that heard it on the news, and also the people that lived in Dallas, have a different fucking view of their police force. Just because, I mean, you look at the intertwine of like, once we found out that the mafia was involved in the CIA, if you look at like Dallas police, how much of gang stuff was going on around them as well, too, that wasn't addressed. I bet you people back then had a lot of issues.
The gang stuff was tied in with criminal activity, breaking enters, car theft, all that sort of stuff. And I mean, it's speculative on my part, but I'm convinced that Fritz and Decker especially were being paid off to leave them alone.
Well, it becomes an issue, like I mentioned before, that when we talk about why haven't they eliminated these people, it's the same reason they haven't eliminated Alex Jones, is that sadly, when it comes to a person speaking out, it's different when you have an army of people speaking out. But if you have one person, that's the same thing with, I think it's Barry Ernst with the girl on the stairs, where he talked about, like, in an interview, why don't you talk to the other person that was with me on the staircase? They never talked to that other witness. They only talked to one person about it. The Warren Commission never bothered to go interview the other people or anybody else.
But I tell you who did, a guy named Sean Murphy, who was the instigator of the prayer man theory and the finder of the film and the namer of the figure that now is called prayer man. He contacted the other girl, Sandra Stiles, and her story was completely different to what her friend had said, but she basically stepped back from saying that she was right and her friend was wrong because of that weird relationship between them. She was the quiet type, and the friend was the gregarious, talkative type, and she just basically said, "Okay, well, I'm not going to argue with what you say." That's what it came down to, even though she really did disagree with it.
Well, I thought the Warren Commission report was very thorough, but the issue is when we talk about thorough, they're thorough in aspects they shouldn't be fucking thorough in. Like, if you're interviewing the second niece who's twice removed from the family about the assassination, who's 5 states over, I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, when we talk about interviewing, like with Barry Ernst's book, The Girl on the Stairs, you should have interviewed the other person that was also there, but they didn't do that. And then I was trying to figure out, because Greg, you're in Australia, and you told me like it might be weird that someone from Australia would be interested in this type of thing. And then after we talked, I saw this document that was published in a Australian newspaper where the CIA had to document it. And it was the CIA withheld vital intelligence from the Warren Commission. And I mean, it goes into, I can read it if you guys want, but it talks about two different assassination techniques. One that I read to Bart off air, which was one recently reported assassination technique is to electrocute an individual by luring him to a telephone connected to a high voltage wire during a thunderstorm. It's crazy as shit. But I just think it, like, when you start looking at, like, okay, if they're reporting that the CIA withheld intelligence from the Warren Commission, you start going, the Warren Commission has its problems. We can all agree. But also, how much of the Warren Commission was going off a lot of evidence and a lot of things on their own investigations, while the CIA was hiding evidence and not giving evidence to the Warren Commission that actually would have helped out? And there's a lot of documents in the new release that talk about the CIA did not disclose this because they didn't feel it was necessary. It's like, I don't know who's making the calls on those situations, but it's not just, that's why I try and say it's not just like one area or one direction. It's a chain reaction of bullshit. And I think it's important.
The Cuba thing wasn't talked about much during that period. The Central Intelligence Agency didn't talk about it towards the Warren Commission as such. The other thing is that the FBI kept military intelligence files out of the equation. And if
sorry, go on, Bart. Yeah.
If you look at why that is, it's quite interesting if you bring it in connection with the Hidel ID, and I spoke to you about that in a previous talk. From the Dallas police, there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever from the 22nd that they had the Hidel ID in their pocket or discussed it, even so. 4 interrogations in one day, and not a word about a Hidel ID, nothing. And then all of a sudden the FBI comes around and they start inserting it as such. Now, military intelligence is basically used in conjecture with, in connection with the introduction of the so-called ID. It's a bit of a smoke and mirrors exercise because in the end, there is no ID. And secondly, the person who made the call to military intelligence cannot be identified. And on top of that, the military intelligence officer, which is Colonel Robert E. Jones, never mentioned anything about an Hidel card. What they did mention of was that there was in their Rolodex system was a Hidel ID, and that basically some newspaper articles would come out as such. But be that as it may, the FBI inserts this at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, an hour after Oswald's arrest and basically drop off at DPD. They basically bring that in. Now, how comes the FBI didn't report that to the DPD there and then and say, yo, man, listen, have you got this ID or this, that, and the other? No, of course not. But the ID only gets called in the next day at 11:30, which is late, which is after the so-called find of the name Hidel at Klein's to basically nail him on the rifle. But what I'm getting at is that if you keep out Robert E. Jones documentation, you have absolutely no explanation whatsoever how the Hidel ID actually was brought forward as such.
Yeah? Well, I believe there was a Hidel with someone using that name in New Orleans because the first sign of the leaflets being handed out, the Pro had the Hidel stamp on it. Okay, and that was at the wharves where the Wasp, the USS Wasp was docked, and it was open day for that. So there was people from the public allowed on board to go and check it all out. And there was someone there handing out the leaflets to those people going on board. Someone complained to the dock police. They came and escorted him off. Okay, and got his name and particulars and whatever. And there was after the assassination. There was that cop that did that later made a report about it, and in that report he gave a description, which is again not Oswald. It's too old, too heavy, etc., etc. Now, what Oswald would tell authorities later was that when he was arrested in New Orleans in August, he actually said that Hidel had contacted him after that Wasp incident and basically said, "Can you take over? I've got to go underground because I've been outed. Basically, I've been discovered." So Oswald said, "Okay, I'll take over," and that's when they started being stamped with Oswald's name and address. So I do really think there was if not a real person named Hidel, at least someone using that name, and it wasn't Oswald.
What I tried to point out was basically that if the FBI doesn't pass on the military intelligence documents to the Warren Commission, then you would have never known how Hidel was actually brought up as such.
Well, that's the same thing with Tom Graham's work with the Post Service. There was individual things or changes of addresses that were filed but never fully, connected through. Like someone was keeping information, and then that came out later. Like, why didn't you tell us that these didn't go through? You're now coming out with the evidence almost a year or so later when there's an investigation into it. And I mean, when we talk about the Hidel ID, Hidel was linked to the rifle. Are you saying that they attached that there just to pin that rifle blame on him? Because that would make more
That's what
sense.
the evidence tells me.
Well, even in the photo, for instance, the people bring up the example of where the God, what's the strap? The strap doesn't doesn't match the one that they found.
Yeah.
And
the length of the rifle, the one that's in Nara, and so forth. There are many discrepancies, but here's the thing: if you cannot find one shred of evidence from the DPD about the selective service card in Oswald's possession, when I have two officers frisk Oswald in the car and also afterwards, when the evidence is on display in the side room next to the room where Fritz was interrogating Oswald, and there's not one place you go, yo, man, there's a second ID. This is a total different name. Nobody brings that up. When the military intelligence all of a sudden, and this whole traffic thing between the FBI and the military intelligence is just a bit of a swamp, and shows that there are two documents that they can fall back on, that there is a Hidel ID as such, which doesn't exist.
Robbie, this will blow your mind. What actually happened later was that when Robert E. Jones phoned that information to the FBI, the guy that took the call duly noted it all in his own hand and later typed it up, and that went down the FBI line through the Hoover. Now, after it was typed up, someone down the line mistook or misread the document, because what he'd written was Oswald and a Hidel. Okay, so two separate people he's talking about there. But someone misread it as not and a Hidel, someone misread it as Anna Hidel, A-N-A, as in a girl's first name. So the FBI actually wasted time looking for a female accomplice because of that. They did. They were looking for Anna Hidel.
Yeah, the Secret Service took care of that on the 5th of December.
Yeah.
They wrote a document about this and saying that it was a spelling error. But
I bet you they have a good laugh about it. Well, they later tried to explain it away by saying that no, that it shouldn't say Anna Hidel. It actually says, or it was meant to say AKA Hidel. In other words, it was an Oswald alias, also known as. Now, when Jones was before the HSCA, the questioner actually put it to him, is it possible that actually said Oswald and N.A. Hidel? In other words, two separate people. And Jones had to admit, yes, that's possible. And that's exactly what it was. He was talking about two separate people, but it became Oswald because that was convenient, because the name of the shipment for the guns was Hidel.
It's only when you go through the documents that you find out the finesse of what's actually being done. The Warren Commission may be a substantial amount of work, this, that, and the other, and considering the speed they did this in, it's nothing short of phenomenal. What other official investigation is rounded up in 10 months after the actual event? Name it to me. I really want to know. Yeah, 10 months.
Well, it's been said that you don't have a presidential commission.
9/11 was wrapped pretty quick.
Yeah, it's been said that you don't have those unless you know what the outcome's going to be, and you've got a political purpose for it. So.
Well, that's what I try and that's, like I said, that's something you can raise a flag at to people, but people would say that's conspiracy. And it's like, we need to make sure that we clearly define what is evidence based and what has been known. Like, people can speculate this or say that, but when people talk about, like, let's say somebody getting thrown out of a second story whatever window or something that was gang related, or it was a cop doing it to a gang member, a suspected person, you wouldn't think, like, if it happened here, you'd be like, that's conspiracy. That didn't happen. But if it happens in Russia or China, people say, oh, that happens over there. Like, it's like, why don't you think it could happen here? And that's like the whole issue when we talk about the whole assassination in the first place, is people don't expect it to be happening where they live. Like, but they're choosing to be ignorant by not looking at what is being published. Like, for instance, I didn't know, like, I've heard people say like the backyard photos were fake. But then I've heard people on the other side say, well, no, because Michael Payne slipped up in an interview and talked about how Oswald showed him those photos. And I was like, hang on, if you like, he's barely apparently at the Payne's house. So you get to this aspect of he's just going to meet some random person, like, hey, check out these cool photos of me in the backyard with a beer and
Yeah,
rifle.
yeah,
So
yeah, no,
well, hold on. When we get to I didn't know the extent of cropping an image until the Mexico thing and the files that are in the 2021 documents when they talked about the alleged photo of Oswald, or what they suspected to be Oswald, was cropped to not give away the full part of the embassy that was there. They went into detail about how they cropped it. And then they also talked about, like, well, with a little bit of adjustment to the eyes and the mouth are the kind of the same size and portions, but clearly from distinctive facial features, this person's in the age range of 35, obviously a little bit more weight. You can tell by the jaw structure. And they went in depth on this photo. And I go, I 100% believe that they could easily Photoshop or crop something with the technology back then. And my knowledge on the technology back then is very, very kind of minuscule, I'd say. But I mean, the in-depth quality of the photo, I mean, I know how to go on my phone on Instagram and turn up the saturation and the fucking sharpness. But these people went into it like they were sitting there in a fucking one of those like meth lab basements looking through the photos with the little liquids and all that. And you know what I'm saying? Like, you know,
I've got a really good scan. I've got a really good scan, and it comes from Jack White's archive. Harry Livingston got some Kodachrome slides that were copies of the backyard photos. The backyard photos themselves are about this big originally, okay? And I've got 4K scans, which are just whoppers of scans. They're pretty damn big for a little photo like that. The first thing you got to know about the backyard photo is that the chin doesn't match. End of debate. All the other stuff about the knuckles, the length of the rifle, the this, that, and the other, the sling, all that, it's all sideshow. And they could be right or not. But compare Oswald's chin with the chin of the person in the backyard photo, and it's already a done deal. I mean, I'm amazed what people actually tend to see in photographs. Yeah. And then just run loose with it and just start talking so much rubbish about it and beliefs and God knows what. Whereas I'm more into what kills this off? What kills this nonsense off right here, right now, etc. And this is how I started and why I got involved with the second floor lunchroom encounter and Oswald and the interrogations, because I just found these things and go, that defies common sense. That is utter bullshit. Now, it happening once, I can understand. But when I hear that Roy Truly walked ahead of Marion Baker up the steps from the second to the third floor, and I'm thinking, why are you walking ahead of a policeman with a gun drawn, and you going up the steps where the possible assassin could be walking down those steps? What on earth? What on earth? What's the matter with you? Why are you doing this? And when then later I find out he does 3 interviews in a 6-month period, and where he said that the officer was walking ahead of him, not him walking ahead of them. And he even does it in the same week as he talks to the Secret Service, where this rubbish is inserted in the first ever report.
For 50 years, no one questioned that until we questioned it at Iraq, at our OKC. But 50 years, no one questioned it.
No.
Well, I saw something about Prayer Man. First of all, what I did with Prayer Man, I went onto your site, Bart, and I grabbed the photo and I tried to fucking think that I could crop and try and, you know, get the. I couldn't. It's fucking impossible.
We've been there. We've done that.
I know. I figured.
We've done all that.
Well, I had to take my shot, like everybody who takes a shot at the Kennedy assassination.
Also, what you need to understand as well, I encourage it because software changes every year. Every year changes. The problem is the resolution. We don't have a large enough resolution because if I had an 8K scan and even a 4K scan of the actual area, I would have artificial intelligence involved. That's the only way to get around it and have artificial intelligence and get it de-blurred. That's how it would work. And even then, you'll have loads of people going, that ain't Oswald, and all that crap. That we'll have to just factor that in because it's like you write a bestseller for Amazon. There's always somebody who wants to do a 1-star
review. I will send it to all my friends in AI. I've talked to plenty of them. I'm sure somebody could take a crack at it.
The problem is the resolution. You need a bigger resolution. What is available is too small. That's the problem. I find out tidbits about the films every year. I find out about 1 or 2 things, and these are then specific frames, you know, and also because of the quality of them. I only found out something in December last year about the people that were going up the steps on the left-hand side in the Darnell film, that one of them was actually standing and was profiled looking down towards the picket fence or the grassy knoll area. I could not see that in any other copy that I had. Yet this particular copy, I managed to see it as such. It's not a big find, it's a small find, but it shows you that there is plenty left to find in these films as such. And basically, and when artificial intelligence gets involved, I'm sure that we'll sort something out of some sort. Yeah.
Do you guys have an opinion on the Zapruder film?
No, there are certain areas that I want to touch. That's one of them. That and the medical autopsy stuff, because it's been done to death and it's been muddied and it's been dirtied, and it doesn't matter what you're going to come out with now. The media, the public are just not going to buy it because it's just so intrinsically linked to nutty conspiracy theories.
Because whenever I look at the medical evidence, the thing that I really pull out of it is the aspect of like people always bring up why wouldn't someone just talk now? Why wouldn't somebody? Because I was like, yeah, you know how many people like Marina Oswald, for instance, or the Oswald family, you know, they just want it to be behind them. They want to get over it. I mean, it's very, very hard when you look at and people always bring up, well, Marina got a bunch of money, did a bunch of book deals in the beginning. I was like, what would you do if you have, you know, your husband that was just killed and now you have kids to support? I mean, I don't blame her for doing any of that type of shit.
I don't blame her either, but the access to all that was contingent on her being a good girl and cooperating with their investigation, which meant changing her story, because her story originally was Lee no do that, Lee good man, Lee don't own rifle, Lee never went to Mexico. All those stories got changed after the introduction of that money and the promise that she wouldn't be deported.
Well, that's the thing. It's like it's forced coercion on so many aspects of this.
Yeah, but look, even though I'm saying that, again, I agree with you. I don't blame her. Okay.
Yeah, but
don't
even
blame
with
her one bit.
all the forced coercion and everything like that, you can take that from the medical evidence of all the people that ran, like Robert Blakey or whoever, the physician for Kennedy, didn't want to do interviews, didn't want to talk about it. The Kennedy family didn't want to talk about it. You know, Robert Kennedy is the only one that did. So
it's Admiral Burke, you mean? I think
it's Burke. Well, I mean, just from that aspect, people go, why aren't they doing that? Like people brought up, I think it's with Conley. They brought up the fact that checking his bones for bullet fragments or something like that. And his wife denied that and said, no, don't do that. Which they were like, hey, dig them up and do that. And it's like, yeah, it would provide new evidence, but how many of these people are either being silent because they're getting paid, silent because of this, or they just don't feel like talking about it anymore? And it becomes an issue when trying to find out the answer.
Those factors can all be considered, but you know, when everybody was so certain there's a different Oswald buried, and they buried it and they dug him up. What was it 1981, something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it was a couple of years after the HSCA folded, and you know, all that hoo-ha, this, that, and the other, and blah blah blah, and the coffin, and the dentures, and the teeth, this, that, and the other, and what came out of it? Nothing.
Well, it's just like what I said in the beginning about where can people start to get interested in it is the same thing I'm going to say here, which is that once people look into even a small detail, they go, how come this isn't solved yet? It's not that fucking simple. That's what I thought when I first went there. I was like, how is this not solved yet? It's obvious a conspiracy. And then you get into it and you start going, oh, it's not that simple. There's a lot of factors that are at play here. There's a lot of things where it's like, why didn't this person do that? And it's like, because you got to look at the other perspective. Are you going to be incentivized to go against your police force of your state? Are you going to be incentivized to go against the government and say that there was this type of thing? You might get a book deal if you're specific, but for everyone else, they have lives, they have jobs, they have things where it's like, this is all shit that they can easily take away from me.
That too. And the thing is also, and this is what makes it all easy for everyone. The guy's dead. Sunday morning, he's dead. By midday or 1 o'clock, he's dead. He's finished. The investigation hasn't even started yet, and he's already dead. Hey, anyone who needs to sign a fake declaration or a statement, hey man, don't worry about it. He's dead already anyway. He's not gonna go against you. Boom, job done.
Yeah, but
Nobody was there to represent it.
It solved so many problems.
But then Jack Ruby, a fucking mafia guy, killed him. He's like, was he a patriot at heart? I don't fucking think so. I've never seen that in a mafia person before.
No, but get away from the mafia side of it. He was a wannabe. He was a wannabe everything. Okay, he wasn't. He knew some low level mafia guys, but he wasn't really mafia. Not really.
Well, that's what really got me about this. And I want to toss this question at you guys and see if you guys might have a different perspective or evidence that you've seen that can maybe verify or deny whatever I'm about to say. But when I was looking through the 2021, and all my information is coming from strictly 2021, there's a lot of stuff there, and I'm not going to have time to be able to do it at least in a week to be able to look through it all. So I'm still looking. But when it comes to what I found, when they talk about the Central Intelligence Agency not having a file on Oswald, I go, either they destroyed it or they do have an account of an interview with Oswald. They said that he did interview for the CIA. There is a file on that. But I go, there's nothing else afterwards. But we know they tracked his mail for 4 years. They know, we all know this, that they were surveilling him. Where I start going, is it possible that Oswald either got picked up by one of these individual actors that were involved in the CIA, people that seemed like they were running without the full responsibility of the CIA? We know with Dulles did that with the 13 American soldiers that were captured in Cuba that led to that Castro interview that Oswald eventually ended up seeing.
Skip back to the news story that you put up a while back that you said was from Australia.
Do you want me to show it again?
Yeah, put it up again. Paul Scott was one of the authors of the story. He's actually a Washington correspondent, a Washington. Robert Allen and Paul Scott. They had a regular syndicated column in America. They weren't Australian. So, but let me tell you a story about them. After the assassination, they published a story about Oswald meeting a CIA agent in the US Embassy when he defected. Okay, and that caused them to become targets of the CIA. That they were actually accused of receiving inside information somehow. And they started getting followed around and God knows what. So yeah, and it was true. The guy that interviewed Oswald, the attaché, was actually CIA. So he was right. That they were right in what they said, but it just wasn't common knowledge that it was CIA. So just the fact that he let that out of the bag caused them a lot of grief. They become targets.
Well, it was weird to me too, is that one thing I came across the education forum was someone talking about Oswald and curtain rods. And apparently he went home to go get some curtain rods. But I do have a document that I can pull up to show you guys where what they call, I think I labeled it. Hold on, make sure I get the right one. Defector names that went to Iron Curtain countries. So I do have a document that does list off a bunch of names that these people that defected to what they would call Iron Curtain countries. So I don't know if that's maybe what people are getting confused with, an aspect that he went to go pick up fucking curtain rods when really it was they're talking about Iron Curtain countries. And
No. That was Bill Fraser claimed that Oswald told him that he was picking up curtain rods that morning, and that was what was in the package that he had.
This is the defector program, and all the names listed about the defector program, none of them involve Lee Harvey Oswald or Alex Hidel ID.
No, this was done, I think, for the HSCA. They decided they needed to do a defector study, so they identified certain criteria for defectors. That's not all defectors that there ever were. That's just ones that meet certain criteria, and they did a study because that criteria made them similar to Oswald, basically. So they wanted to compare what happened with Oswald to what happened with these guys. So were these guys allowed back to America quickly?
The thing with Oswald as a defector, from what I've read in the Blunt files, is that Oswald's file as a defector was treated completely different than any of the other defectors. That's a red herring. That's something where you can go, hold on a minute, why is that? And that would, now Malcolm can tell this specifically. He's told me about 3 times, but I'm so dumb I never keep anything in my head. So basically what he said was that that's just, I think it was kept in the Office of Mail Logistics, OLC. I think no, hold on, that's wrong. It's basically kept in the department that were basically no one else was having access to that particular file. That by itself is quite remarkable. The comparison with William Webster has also been brought up as such, but Webster has even more secretive things around him. It's regarding an exhibition in Moscow. There's tons of documents in the Blunt archives. If you ever want to know about defectors and so forth, there's loads of stuff in there.
Yeah, well, there were things about Webster that made him the most similar to Oswald. I mean, he threatened to give secret information to the Russians. He was over there at the Moscow, what was it, the World Fair type thing that they were having there, and he was demonstrating spray guns for use in rocket ships. And when he decided to defect, he said he was going to give that technology to the Russians. Now, when he defected, the Russians not only took that information, but they also gave him a job in the factory to show how to put these blueprints together and make these particular spray guns. And basically, they ended up saying he was hopeless and put him back in another part of the factory to keep him out of the way. And something similar happened with Oswald. He was put in with his threat to give radar secrets. All of a sudden, he found himself in Minsk in an experimental factory. The factory he worked in, Robbie, had a secret part to it, which was military based and concentrated on secret technology. So that's where he was for the first 2 weeks he was working there, until they discovered he probably didn't know what he was doing, and they put him out with the workers in the household radio part of the factory.
I got to get you some. I'm about to say, I got to get you some questions to ask Malcolm for me, or get him a Zoom account, or do something. I got to talk to that man. Why do you use his documents so much? Like, what's Malcolm's background? Because I know some people use the Garrison files, and then some people use Fletcher.
He went to the archives, and what he did was he first started out in Dallas and the municipal archives, and worked there with a lady called Cindy Smolovic, who helped him out a lot. And Malcolm joined forces. He collaborated with John Armstrong a lot, basically provided a lot of documentation to Armstrong. And it was called the Oswald Project back then. And when Malcolm found out what John Armstrong was going for, Harriet and Lillian, as we always say, as I always call it, basically that pissed him off quite a bit. And he said he didn't share his findings and conclusions. And they fell out for a while, about a year or so. And they're now in contact. I don't know in what way, but Armstrong apparently is still researching. But Malcolm works basically with loads of researchers, because I have never seen so many JFK books that are being sent to him and are all autographed. Thanks, Malcolm, for your help, this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. Because he goes down to the National Archives, and he's been down to Tennessee, he's been to Miami, he's been to Dallas, obviously, and Washington, Georgetown, and Nara, of course. And he just sat there, and for one period, he was in the country for 6 months. And he lived about a mile away from Nara, and basically went in there 5-6 days a week and just plowed through the documents. And that's what I've basically been digitizing so far at this point. I think I've done about 150,000 pages. So we're talking about 18,000 PDFs that I've created and basically uploaded as such. And it's been very laborious type of job, but I found a lot of stuff that is incredibly valuable. I've got enough stuff for about 10 articles to follow as well, because I've got more than anyone else. So I was just like, nah, I'm not handing this out. Fuck you lot. I'm doing this myself. But I have basically published the archives. So what's there is 95, 97% basically of the material is there, what I've done so far. Every few months I go to Malcom. I do a video with him. I just did one about 3 weeks ago. And you know, they're good fun. We talk. They're like this. We've got like some points we wish to discuss or names, and other than that, nothing is set as an agenda of what we talk about. So, although I need to do that at some point and be a bit stricter, but we got good talks. And the thing is that he went to the archives and just sat there and basically just nabbed them. And he went through stages. He went through the late 90s. He went through Dallas and Washington. Then he went to Florida. He worked a lot with Gordon Winslow and did the Cuban thing for about 3 or 4 years. And that was quite a natural progression for him then to go into the spook territory and basically talk about that. But then he's not interested. Of course, he's interested in what people say in their communications between the HSCA or internally. But he's more interested in something that's really uninterested to a lot of people, and that's basically the mechanics of it all, the departments, who works with whom, and you know, and who doesn't work with that particular department, and what department is responsible for putting out documentation as such, and this, that, and the other. Now, 10 years ago, everybody was Angleton, and it just went on and on and on until it becomes a mantra, and everybody starts believing. Same as David Atlee Phillips. He was like persona non grata, major war criminal, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. And everybody, oh, David Atlee Phillips, blah, 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 blah. And then the nuances start to come out and go, right, yeah, okay, well, maybe it's just not like we thought it was. And that's what Malcom does. Malcom provides a lot of nuance because of the sheer amount of paperwork that's actually there.
And a lot of, as you said before too, not just the nuance, but an understanding of how these departments work. Because that's where a lot of the misunderstanding comes from, not understanding why this was sent there, or why this person's got that, or, you know, all those little things mean a lot in interpreting those documents.
Well, I'm going to ask.
That's why
I was going to ask the question, what do you guys find strange? And I'm not saying strange about the Kennedy assassination. My answer will probably give you a better grasp of what I'm talking about. Is I always find it strange when I hear someone talk about like Kennedy in such an admirational way, where it's like he was the best president, he was this. And I was like, I don't know if presidents are different back then than they are today, or maybe I just have a different viewpoint. Like I understand that's with Life magazine, for instance, their grasp was probably, I guess, what Fox News would be today. They kind of controlled everything, which is why their name's involved in a lot of those documents that I read. But I always hear like, even there's some interviews where someone goes like, Kennedy was my favorite president. And then they'll ask the kids, like, who's your favorite president? And the kids are like, Kennedy. I'm like, was he in office that long to really be able to be admired in that sense? Or
it basically, there's the whole fairy tale element is basically around the Camelot, Jackie, and, you know, and all these things, these factors. Part of it was happening at that time, but I think they doubled the effort after the assassination as such.
A lot of the admiration is based on potential and promise rather than actual the mechanics of what he did when he was in office. It was what he could have done. That's why people like him.
Whether he would have gotten it done, that's a whole different
yeah exactly
it's now the way it is as it's presented now. People say, well, we're gonna get the guns, or we're gonna climb it, this, that, and the other. Well, first you got the House, then you got the Senate. Oh, it's gonna get torpedoed in the Senate. So, you know, but what's the point? But they still pretended like it's something like earth shaking, earth moving, and we're gonna take care of this and blah blah blah. No, you're not. You get shut down in the Senate. Simple as that.
And of course, you can't ignore the fact that he was a good-looking guy. He had a good-looking wife, and there was that whole that fed into the promise bit. like it was a brand new era, and this young Prince Charming is going to lead us into that bright new era. That was what I think. That sort of fairy tale aspect to it is what reels people in, and they nominate him for that reason.
And the problem with that is that these people are so infatuated, they cannot keep a distance and basically look at it in a neutral, sober way, and basically just look at it and go, hold on a minute, what's actually happening here? See, for us, the approach is surgical. We're not like, oh, Kennedy was a great president. I am going to be honest here. I don't give a toss about JFK. He's a good-looking guy, this, that, and the other, but I really don't give a toss about anything of it. I don't care about Jackie. I don't care about anything. I'm caring about solving a little puzzle, a little part of the puzzle out of this massive, huge enigma that's actually just going around the whole thing as such. That's all I care about. And maybe that's my forte, because I'm just not emotional about it. I'm not emotionally involved. And you have to be as a surgeon as well. You cannot be emotional as a surgeon while you start cutting away on somebody's body as such. So that's the way I look at this research.
The reason why I asked that wasn't to defame JFK. It was just to bring up, I think people are heading into the assassination with that mindset the wrong way. I think you have to look at this from not any personal reason, but obviously from what we can tell. And, where there's issues with evidence and there's issues with cover-ups and things of that sort. Like I come into this, but I don't have a bias in anything. I mean, I got an interesting question for you. So Oswald's .38 revolver was a thing they got him. Okay, so there's a document that came out in the 2021. It's a later issue dealing with a Cuba incident, but they talked about it was a letter from whatever you want to call them, agents or something like that, but they're mafia people. And they were requesting for high-powered rifles. And then in a separate letter, they requested for .38s, where I just start going, are .38s like the most common gun back then? Is that a coincidence that they both had .38s, like Oswald had .38s? Because people say Oswald killed JFK with what they would call full metal jacket bullets, where I start going, who the fuck is selling full metal jacket bullets to the general public? That's like a military thing. So that means if you're saying he's not Central Intelligence, how would he have FMJ bullets? A black market deal or something like that? Where I just think there's a lot of things where a lot of people that would deny one thing but boast the other. It's not consistent. Like then you would have to admit to this factor, which you said isn't true, that he was a CIA intelligence factor, unless there was like a common selling of FMJ bullets to the general public. How would he get them for his rifle if he wasn't involved in the military?
Well, the gun, first of all, was tossed. That's one thing. The police tossed.
There's another interesting aspect to the purchase of the weapons, and that's, as you would know, the Dog Committee investigation. Just to fill Robbie in, the Dog Committee was a Senate subcommittee, and they were investigating the sale of mail order weapons and the shipment of concealable weapons. And two of the companies that they were particularly interested in were two of the companies that these weapons were bought from. Sea Traders and
Seaport Traders.
Seaport Traders, and what was the other one?
Klein's?
Klein's, yeah, Klein's. Yeah, no, Klein's, yeah. And they were two of the companies that the subcommittee was investigating, and they were the two sources of the rifle and the pistol. And there's evidence that other investigators that they used were also purchasing weapons to determine whether proper procedures were being followed in purchasing those weapons. So I think I think out of all the theories I've heard, that's the one that makes most sense to me. That those weapons were purchased at that time as part of the Dog subcommittee investigation.
Oh my God. And for anybody out there listening, I know it's going to be confusing for you. Well,
no, not at all.
what I really appreciate you guys walking me through this stuff. I really do. Like, I mean, it means a lot, only because I get asked questions of like, man, you're doing a lot of JFK episodes, or man, you're really interested in the JFK assassination. I was like, you would be too if you just looked into it, because it's some it's just fascinating. I mean, taking it from a historical standpoint, where I'm more about trying to correct the record, no matter where those chips lie. If somebody says the mafia did it, if they say Oswald was the lone nutter, and we have all the documents that prove that, I don't think that's true, though, because we have plenty of things that you can bring up and raise flags at. And the fact that people don't kind of scares me a little bit. But even with all the mass confusion, because it is a lot of confusion, there's a lot of stuff there and it can be overwhelming. Especially, I'm looking back at stuff. I just was like, I need to stick to 2021. Let me work it back. I'll go to 2018 and 2017 in like a month or so. But through talking with you guys, you're filling in gaps for me as well, too, on things that you did. And you guys do come correct with your information. I've checked out your guys' sites.
21 documents is peanuts compared to 2017, 2018. So if you start messing about with that, let's talk in 2 years, okay? And that's not me trying to be funny, but the amount of material that's in those tranches is massive. So much more, because this was only a small bunch. That was only a small batch of 21 documents that Biden released, the 2017. But what's more important are the 19 documents, the documents that were done in the 90s. They weren't digitized. That's the problem. I've got so many riff sheets. I got a stack of riff sheets that are basically all documents on the HSCA and the Dallas Police and so forth. And these haven't been digitized. Now, some people have basically managed to get some documents basically by getting the originals and put them on the photocopier at NARA and then bringing them back. But they don't share them. So the real way, the right way would be to say, you know what, all this stuff hasn't been digitized as such. Now, Biden has said that he wants that done, and I hope it gets done, because that, to me, is the most important batch of documentation that actually the ARB got released as such. You know what, this crying about the few documents that are left over and this, that, and the other, I can understand it, but at the same time, these same people are only going after that particular bunch. They don't go after the documents that are missing or cannot be found or this, that, and the other. So, you know, it's much bigger than just a box full of documents that might be interesting on Howard Hunt and all
It's
these
a
other
100-piece
characters.
puzzle, but you're missing 25 of it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know if that's the right way with saying it with them, but my point is that they're hell-bent on getting that section of documents, that group of documents published out in the open. And then, you know what, there won't be that much to look at. The only thing you'll probably see is something that would embarrass the agency or the FBI as such. That's the type of thing, or a connection between two people that they don't want to have to come out. That's what you're going to look at.
And don't underestimate the embarrassment side of it. Hoover was absolutely paranoid about the FBI being embarrassed. So a lot of what he did was driven by that, not about covering up or anything else. It was driven by saving embarrassment.
That's how it works.
I think it's pretty damning when most of your documents you have released now are saying things that you're working with the mafia and you're working with gangs basically in your institutions. I think a lot of people that are new to just government shit in general, that's a big shocker. Where I was looking at, like I said, the documents, it's incriminating to me. Like that's just, I'm looking through it. I'm like, this is plenty incriminating. I don't want to know what's.
They're all dead. They're all dead.
When they were yeah, but they were successful at doing those things. It doesn't just stop; it evolves.
They won. That's as simple as that. They won. It's as simple as that. They got away with it. It's the same people. Like if you connect 9/11 with the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, they won too. They made loads of money. That's what it's all about. In the end, it's all about money. All of it is about money, but large amounts of money, and a lot of people jumping in that gap.
What this needs to be about now is correcting history and getting whatever justice is still possible. That might not be much, but there could be something that can still be extracted from the system to give justice to someone or some party, like members of the Oswald family or whoever, you know. That's the best we can do. That's the best we can do. But that's a worthwhile cause. Right there.
It's righting a wrong that was created. It's not necessarily, it wasn't there in the first place. It was fabricated out of nothing. So
I mean, the whole idea about whether it's a conspiracy or not is a moot point, because you're not going to be able to punish anyone. They're all dead. Okay, and there's only a handful of people left. What? Am I going to chase 93-year-old or 94-year-old Elmer Boyd and say that he was involved in a conspiracy of basically nailing Oswald to the cross?
Fuck yeah, drop an elbow on him.
I'll consider it a victory if we can get Oswald exonerated and the case reopened. That, if that's as far as it goes, that's a win, I reckon.
I mean, getting him exonerated from shooting Kennedy, that would be quite a coup. But
look, Hoover testified that the case would remain reopened forever. Okay, or forever being, I guess, as long as it takes. But the FBI did actually quietly close it without any announcement. So, you know, I mean, did Hoover perjure himself by saying it will remain open forever? I think he did. He did, because that wasn't the case. So, I mean, any case can be reopened if you've got enough evidence to do it.
And then, you know, we'll get like something written on page 7 of the newspaper that says, oh yeah, by the way, Kennedy case solved, Oswald's innocent, this, that, and the other. Boom. There you go.
Yeah,
Page
well,
7, little column on the bottom right there, or in the left inside. Well hidden.
I'm just holding out for Jackie Kennedy's dress. They said 2100 is when it's coming out. So
who cares? No, I don't care about that.
Special favor.
No, but you could go to probably the archives and get, and if you're a documentary, to basically try to film that. I think most of the objects can be filmed as such, but I don't see the point in A, in hiding it, and B, just, you know, why would it was been photographed when she came off the plane and stood in that truck to go to the ambo to go in when the coffin was, you can see the bloods, but I'm not somebody that's that fascinated with that type of detail as such, you know. I'm not a hoarder. I know lots of people that are collectors, and they go, oh, this is a piece of the picket fence, and I'm going, which picket fence? Is this the 63 picket fence or the 70 something picket fence, or and later on in the 90s, blah blah blah. Oh, this is the real picket, blah blah blah, and this is a rock that was right next to it. I'm going,
no, I seriously appreciate the advice and all the help you guys have.
Just walk away now. I'm telling you.
I'm not. No,
walk away.
I'm
Don't
too far in.
Get involved in
I already
this.
got grays in the beard. It's too late. I appreciate seriously everything you guys have done. Is there a place where people can find your links? Bart, you want to go first, and then Greg, we can end with your link in your forum.
Well, my website's prayer, man. That's prayer hyphen so dash man.com. I post my articles there. I post my papers there, and whenever I have something new in the update section in miscellaneous, you can see when I add things on. So it's something that keeps going on. It's not final at all yet. So hopefully, well, people keep telling me I need to do a book, which means I have to redo the whole thing, and it's about the last thing I want to do. And I'm still busy with Malcom Blunt's archive, which I publish at Dealey Plaza UK.com, and yeah, you know, there's plenty of documents there to go through that. If you're really interested, I mean, but you should read 20 books at first. And then when you find your subject that you're really interested in, that's when you start digging. I mean, I can't do it. I couldn't say it any other way. A few websites isn't going to do it. You have to look at everything. And you also have to understand that even though some person you don't like and his work whatsoever, there's still that little bit of nugget in there hidden somewhere on page 89. And yeah, it means you've got to read that whole damn book and this, that, and the other. And you curse everything to the gods. But then you find that little bit and they go, aha! And that bit could be really, really interesting. So, and very vital, very, very valuable. So, yeah, you just have to go through it all. That's my thing.
I don't know why my brain immediately went the conspiracy route when you said hyphen. I was like, Hidel, there's a linkage. And then I fucking went down the route in my brain. But Greg, please, where can people find you?
Best way, the forum, the ROKC forum, just Google reopen Kennedy cases. It should appear first in the list. My other site is gregrparker.com.
I'll make sure I link it all in the description. It's been a pleasure chatting, guys.
I'm going to warn everyone that if you go to ROKC, which is the favorite place for me to hang and go,
It's brutal.
And Greg, of course, it is brutal.
I like it when someone says
we don't take prisoners. We don't take prisoners. Anyone that bullshits or lies is condemned to the gallows immediately. And we've got trolls. And you know what? They now know, especially in the last 5 years, to stay well clear from us because we trash them and we call them everything. And they just avoid us, and they say it from a far distance and going, oh no, that place I don't go to. No, because you get hung, drawn, and quartered over there, because what we do is the evidence. The correct evidence, Brian.
What makes me laugh is that they won't, they'll say don't go there because they dropped the F-bomb, you know? Sorry, guys.
Yeah. Oh, that's so shocking. Blah, blah, blah.
I like it, but I get an anxiety attack every time I look at it. I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. This is, well, there's like a fucking, like 5 pages long of just like a call out to somebody. And I'm like, whoo, I got dyslexia. I can't do all that.
It's best not to get involved.
That particular person has causes a lot of problems. So
I get it.
You know,
all right.
yeah.
But
well, not so much. Just trolling. Just not problems. Just trolling. And just, you know what?
Well,
you don't quit.
He got me kicked off Amazon. So
No, but he's just trolling left, right, and center, wherever he can. And that's all he does, is basically come after us. He follows us. I wouldn't be surprised that once this video comes up, he'll be wringing his hands and goes, right, let's say something.
Yeah.
Nope. He should not be named is what we're going to say. Guys, thanks for joining me on this episode, and thanks for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank Podcast.